Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. And today I'm going to be ranking the NBA MVPs over the past 20 seasons. That is the year 1999 to 2000 season through the 2018 to 19 season. So um, that is 20 years, and I am just going to be ranking from what I think is the least impressive MVP season to ultimately the most impressive MVP season. And I'm sure lots of people will have varying opinions on this, but I'll give my rationale for why I put the season in the specific spot. And of course, as always, feel free to leave your thoughts or comments in the comment section below and give your input on who you think should be placed in what slot. This is just how I perceived it based on I'm primarily going off of teams' success in the regular season and individual statistics and like the supporting cast that each MVP had. So that's some intro on where I was headed with this video, and let's get into it. So I think the least impressive MVP season since 2000 is Allen Iverson in 2001. And my reasoning for this is Allen Iverson, I think, averaged like 29 points per game. The Sixers won 56 games and they got to the finals. But in my opinion, um, Iverson basically put up the same season he always did from about 1999 to 2003. It just so happens that this is the year where they had like an all-star next to him in at first Theo Ratliff before they traded him at the deadline to get Dikembe Mutombo. Um, so that's really the difference of why they were a lot more successful. Um, but Iverson himself didn't play really any different than he normally would in any other year. It was more like his supporting cast just played better than they normally would. Also, people think that it's pretty impressive that they won 56 games, but I'll remind you this is at the basically the apex of the Eastern Conference being really, really bad. And so honestly, it was more of like a power vacuum in that you had the Pacers who had fallen off by this point after making the finals the year before. You had the Knicks who were finally starting to fall off. You had the Bulls that were gone. You didn't really have the New Jersey Nets Jason Kidd team coming up yet. You didn't have the Pistons coming up yet. This was really a weak Eastern Conference. You had T-Mac in Orlando, so Vinsanity didn't even have any help in Toronto, and so Iverson didn't have much competition in the East, so that's not that impressive to me. Next, I have the 2005 Nash MVP, in which he averaged 18 points, 10 assists. This one is low mainly because it was a pretty contentious MVP, and that a lot of people thought Shaquille O'Neal should have won this one. Nash basically was the classic example of a player winning MVP because they're on the team that had the most wins rather than having like more of like the individual gaudy stats or anything like that. It was just kind of like your standard best player on the best team of that season, and that's what Nash was. But there were other contenders who could have won this award over him pretty easily, namely Shaquille O'Neal. This is one of the closest MVP finishes of all time. I think Shaq lost by the final points totals were like 1060 to like 1030, which if you are at all familiar with MVP balloting is extremely close, and like it's the difference of like um it's essentially the difference of like 10 different people's opinions, and when it's like 150 or like 200 people being interviewed for this kind of stuff, ten opinions being all the difference is like very close, obviously. Next, I have the 2006 Nash MVP. Basically the same as the exact season before, but this year the narrative for him was that he was the best player on a team that defied expectations. They didn't have Amari Stoudemire all year. They had lost Quentin Richardson and also Joe Johnson to free agency, and yet they still were a 54-win team. Um, Nash put up 19 and 11 this year, so better stats, but still not that impressive to me for an MVP. Also had really strong competition for MVP this year, so between all those things, I think it's a weaker MVP season. Next, I have '04 Garnett. as far as why I have him lower on here, I think him being low isn't because he had a bad season. It's just because there's so many great historic seasons that are going to be above his. But his stats actually aren't all that impressive. 24 and 14 and 5. Scoring pretty low for an MVP, honestly. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. Um, and I think like Garnett, they succeeded this year, but the Wolves, that is. But he also, like, for the first time in his career, had like solid supporting cast work with him. He had another All Star in Sam Cassell, and then like a borderline All Star in Latrell Sprewell, and then he had like a Six Man of the Year in Wally Zerbiak. So basically, he just showed you what he can do when he has decent supporting cast. Um, but I just feel like that Wolf season, in Minnesota, it's a big deal for people here, but for people anywhere else, it's a pretty ho hum like season, I think. Um, and that's me trying to be really objective because I am from Minnesota. um, Next, I have the '02 Duncan season and the '03 Duncan season next to each other. And really, the '04 Garnett and those two Duncan MVPs, those are all like really hard to separate for me because Garnett's team won 58 games, then the '02 Spurs won 58, and then the '03 Spurs won 60 games. So as far as team success, they were all pretty close. And then as far as supporting cast, Duncan actually had a worse supporting cast than that. You had like a rookie Tony Parker, a very young Manu Ginobili, and like a wheelchair riddled David Robinson at this point. And you could argue his second best player during this stretch was um, you could argue it was like Steven Jackson, who was averaging like 12 points a game during this point. Duncan puts up similar numbers to Garnett. The first year he puts up 23 and like 12, and the second MVP season he puts up 25 and 12. Actually, in 2002 he put up the 25 spot, and in 2003 he put up the 23. Um, Overall, just again, as far as statistics, like good, but kind of pedestrian as far as an MVP goes. And then team success, 58 to 60 wins. And again, sort of feels like best player on the best team winning MVP. And I'm always a proponent that best player on the best team is sort of a weak argument for MVP, in my opinion. I think um, if you're surrounded by a bunch of talent, then you being the MVP isn't nearly as impressive unless you're like the one who stands alone, who stands out as the MVP on your team. Like some guys above here on the list, and I'll make that distinction when they come up. But yeah, so I think, as I say, the Garnett season and the two Duncan seasons all very similar. And actually, the one above this, Nowitzki at number, actually, I don't know what number this is. It's at 13. Nowitzki in 2007 won MVP. The Mavericks won 67 games, which is very impressive. Not a ton of help around him. I think, we had Josh Howard as the only other All Star on the team. Um, and he was like a fringe All Star at that. But so I put Nowitzki higher than the Duncan and Garnett seasons because their team had more regular season success. 67 wins in the West is super difficult, so being able to accomplish that I thought merited a higher spot than the Duncan and Garnett seasons. And of course, MVP doesn't factor in the playoffs, so the Mavericks losing in the first round shouldn't really count against Dirk here. Um, but as far as stats, again, I think the stats sort of hold Dirk back here, and I think it's another best player on the best team got MVP thing where he averaged 24 and 8, like 24 points, 8 rebounds a game. Didn't really play much defense this year. The thing that really set him apart and people were saying ooh la la at was that he shot 50% from the field, 40 from three, and 90 from the free throw line, which is a very rare statistical feat that's only been done by like Durant, Steph Curry, Larry Bird, and Nowitzki. Those are, I think, the only four who have ever done it. So people at the time, he was the second person to ever do it. Maybe Steve Nash is in there too. So at this time, Larry Bird and Nash were the only other people to have done it, and so Dirk was the third person. And people just seem to be in love with that whole efficiency 50, 40, 90 stat line. So that helped him, but also just he was the best player on a 67 win team. I think really boosted his MVP case. And I'm gonna sort of sound like a broken record here, but it's the same thing for my next person on this list, which was Steph Curry in 2015. In 2015, the Warriors won 67 games, and Steph was basically, again, the best player on the best team, and that's why he got MVP. If you look at his stats from that year, they're not as impressive. Now, I'm not talking about his 2016 MVP, I'm talking about the year before, 2015. In 2015, he shot like 47% from the field. He shot like 42, 43% from 3 point, and then from the free throw line, I think 90%. So close to that 50, 40, 90 season, but not quite there. And then he averaged 7 assists a game and 23 points with playing basically no defense. And so basically had the same season as Dirk right below him, but I think Steph was a bit more dynamic and versatile offensively as far as being able to create his own shot a bit more, so I put him a little bit higher here. And also, his team won the finals versus the Mavs losing in the first round. I know it shouldn't be a factor, but I almost implicitly included it as a factor here. Next, I have Kobe in '08. Kobe put up pretty standard numbers. His team won 57 games in the West, and for most of the year, they had Kwame Brown as one of the best players on the team, so that's pretty impressive. But nothing really that out of the ordinary from Kobe this year. I feel like this was sort of like in the Oscars. A lot of times they give out an Oscar like well beyond when the actor should have gotten it because they missed out on the right year, so they just kind of make up for it in a random year later. I feel like this is the makeup MVP award for Kobe, where he probably should have won it like 2 to 3 years before this, but they were like, man, we just never got the opportunity to give it to him, so it's a weaker MVP race. Here you go, Kobe, have an MVP. At number 11, I have 2017 Westbrook. Obviously, he averaged like 30, 10, and 10, which is super impressive, but I'm going to hold it against him that the Thunder only won 47 games. And he actually had a very similar season to the Iverson MVP to me, but I'm just putting him higher up, significantly higher up, because he had such an impressive statistical feat in averaging a triple double for only the second time in history. At number 10, going into the top 10 here, I have 2011 Derrick Rose, who averaged 20, 26 and 8, and he led the Bulls to 62 wins, which was super impressive considering I think they were like a 41 win team the year before, or 44 wins, or either way, they had a huge jump in wins. Nothing on the team really changed besides Carlos Boozer coming in. And let me tell you this, Carlos Boozer, you're saying like, well, they added an all-star. It's obvious that their wins would go up, but he missed something like 30 to 40 games, and this supporting cast was not that good. Joakim Noah was still coming into his own. Luol Deng wasn't in his all-star years yet, so he was good, like 16 points per game, but he he was basically a good solid starter, but nothing beyond that at this point. And D Rose basically put the team on his back and said, "Hey, here we go. We're gonna lead the East, and I'm gonna try and take you to the promised land." Of course, they lost in the playoffs, but 62 wins for a team that had Ronnie Brewer and Keith Bogans, who was at the time like 35, as major rotational pieces. Uh, that's impressive to me. Also, Omer Ashik as a major rotational piece. Like they didn't have this stacked team. They had a lot of fringe NBA players playing rather key roles on a 62 win team, and that's all on the shoulders of D Rose. So I gotta hand it to him. That was a really impressive season. Even though I at the time thought LeBron should have won it, I can see now that Derrick Rose merited winning that award. At number 9, I have the 2012 LeBron season. This season to me is like one of the most forgettable MVP seasons. It was the lockout shortened season. The Heat won if you adjust to an 82 game schedule, the Heat won 58 games. LeBron was good. I think he averaged like 26, 8, and 8. But it wasn't. It just didn't stand out to me, and um, it felt kind of like we're just giving LeBron the award because some voters felt guilty from giving it to D Rose the year before, and basically because I feel like LeBron won this MVP more from a lack of competition rather than him like earning it. Like, yes, he put up his standard numbers, but I feel like I can't remember anybody else who's in contention for MVP that year. Like I think Durant was, but um, it just was a forgettable year. I think besides it being a lockout to me. Next, I have Durant from 2014. Led the Thunder to 58 wins. Westbrook missed like 50 games, or actually, no, I'm wrong on that. Westbrook missed like 30 games, but Durant was kind of shouldered with this larger load, and I think he averaged something like 30 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and was showing that he could shoulder the load. Um, and I think kind of similar to D Rose, like I think it's impressive that he averaged those statistical numbers and then also led a Western Conference team missing their second best player to 58 wins, which is equally as impressive as winning 62 in the East. So similar to the D Rose season, I have Durant in here. Um, Next, I have the 2010 and 2009 LeBron seasons. I ranked number 9 above number 10 because in 2009 they won 66 games on the Cavs compared to 2010 when they only won 61 games. Technically, LeBron was actually more statistically impressive in 2010. He averaged like a 2 points higher and like a whole assist higher, but the stats are pretty negligible. Like I think in 2010 he averaged like 38 and 9, and in 2000, or he averaged like 39 and 9, and then in 2009 he averaged like 28 8 and 7 or something like that. But I ranked 2009 again above it because more wins, and then also his supporting cast was worse than that season. So the fact that they were more successful, even though the supporting cast was worse, I think proves that LeBron made a bigger significant contribution. Now we're into our top 5 here, and I have Giannis winning it last year. And actually, this can get bundled into those LeBron seasons because the Bucks won 60 games. Giannis put up like 30, 13, and like 6, and I felt very similar to LeBron's MVP seasons where like limited supporting cast help and putting up these gargantuan numbers and leading a team to MVP that really it had one other All Star, but not that like a more of a fringe All Star. You know, Mo Williams on the Cavs, and then Chris Middleton on the Bucks. So I find those two LeBron MVPs on Cleveland and the Giannis MVP to kind of be a bundle, just like I found the Garnett and Duncan seasons to be a bundle. Um, Number 4, I have 2018 Harden. I found it very impressive that the Rockets won 65 games that year. He averaged something like 29, 6, and 9. Decent efficiency. And the team, if Chris Paul doesn't get injured, with them up 3-2, they probably are the NBA champions of that season right now. Um, yeah, overall, just kind of put everything together, and I think this was a very long overdue MVP for him because he was the 2-time runner-up leading this award, and I think people knew that just they had to give it to him this year. It was his time. 2013, LeBron is my next. He averaged 27, 8, and 8 this year, which sounds similar to 2012, but the efficiency is where it's different. He averaged a career high, I believe, 57% from the field and like 42% from three. He's never really shot that nearly that high in three before or after, but he was just an efficiency monster this year between those, the 58% from the field and 42 from three. That is super impressive for him. Same usual, he's always in that range of like between 26 to 30 points per game and always between 7 to 10 rebounds, 7 to 10 assists. But this year the Heat also won 66 games, which is tied for the most that a team he's been on has ever won. So between the efficiency numbers and the wins, I had to put him here. Next, I have Steph Curry from 2016. He had one of those 50, 40, 90 seasons, also the 73 wins. He averaged 30 and 8, 30 points, 8 assists. A truly unique and special season, and the 73 wins was super impressive. Obviously, the only black mark on this season is they didn't win the NBA title, but that doesn't really factor in to regular season MVP. And the top one I put as Shaq from the year 2000. The Lakers won 67 games. Shaq averaged like 30 points, 14 rebounds, and basically there was just no stopping him this year. And they were just the team to beat, and everybody knew it. And Shaq was the definition of utter dominance. So I have him as number one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you have any thoughts, leave them below. See you next time. Bye.